We all know Jim Cornelison as the anthem singer, but Jim is way more than that. Jim started singing the anthem for the Blackhawks part-time in '96, has been singing the national anthem for the Blackhawks full-time since 2007. 8 years at the Indy 500, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Wow, and a classically trained opera singer. That's impressive. It is.
He's the only one in the house right now.
Dan Roan, not a classically trained opera singer.
Or anything else for that
38
matter.
years at WGN TV, 45-year television career, multiple Emmy Awards, thousands of games, and a lifetime of memories, and you're retired.
Retired and enjoying it, but I do have a lot of memories. A lot of stuff happened over those 45 years, Pete.
Oh, I'm sure we're going to get to that.
Do they get kind of mixed up sometimes, Dan?
Kind of mixed up,
Yeah,
Jim?
you're able to tell, like, you know.
Yeah, I'm having trouble remembering any of the 90s at all.
We all are.
If it weren't for Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're both ambassadors for Access One. Jim, what does that mean to you?
For me, it's really about being able to work with people that I like and I can trust. And then from a branding perspective, Access One deals with cybersecurity and managed IT. So from a branding perspective, you need to work with a company that you can trust, that is reliable, that is consistent. If you think about my anthem, I think all of those things are true. If you want to hire me to come do the job, you can be pretty sure I won't forget the words, and I'll deliver something. I'll deliver something that people will remember. So it kind of lines up that way.
Fantastic. Well, let's start from the beginning. 45 years on television.
Yeah.
You really only had two jobs, right?
I did have two jobs. The way I got started in the first place is kind of unusual. I'm working at a bookstore at ISU over Christmas by myself in this apartment, you know, feeling sorry for myself over the holidays. And somebody walked in the store and said they're taking volunteers to come over and work at TV 10, the student-run TV station. And they're going to pay you $3 an hour to do it, which back in those days was like a fortune. I mean, you could buy 3 pitchers for that much money at the bar down the street. So anyway, I went over there and did it for a couple of weeks. And like Access One, in a way, I was really impressed with the way everybody worked as a team to get this broadcast on. And I didn't really know that much about TV at that point. But it got to be really fun, really fast, and by the time the second semester started, I'd changed my major and done it for a year, got an internship, got a job in Champaign, and was kind of off and running.
So you went to college, you didn't really have a plan. I mean,
That
I can relate
is
to
correct.
that. I'm just saying, I didn't go to college from a small town farm community thinking I'm going to be an opera singer.
No, same thing here. I mean, I was probably going to wind up being an English teacher, believe it or not. I mean, that's kind of where I was headed. But I got short-circuited there, and I couldn't be happier about it.
And how do you decide as a kid to become a classically trained opera singer? What's going on in that head of yours?
I didn't even really start singing. I tell you, I was not an outstanding high school student, and I needed 2 credits to finish up, you know, and graduate from high school. So I jumped back into band, which I hadn't played my trombone for a few years, and then jazz choir. So, you know, that was the first time I really started singing. And it wasn't until college I went and I was thinking of studying music because I did play the piano some. And at the end of a first year, a professor sat me down and he said, Jim, are you serious about music? I thought, yeah, I think so. And he goes, well, you're not a good piano player. You're nowhere where you need
We're
to
going
be.
to cross that off the list right
that's
there.
Right.
Yeah.
He said, but I think you might have something with your voice, and you should think about studying voice. So that was kind of the turnaround. What's so funny is I came from a small 7,000-8,000 people farming community that went on asparagus schedule every spring, right?
Really?
Yeah, so school started an hour late so we could all go out and cut asparagus. I never thought I was a country bumpkin until I started telling people that story. From,
And then it finally hit you
Chicago.
as an adult. Sure.
Yeah. So anyway, I didn't really even understand what he meant by study voice or singing, you know, as I kind of grew up with that. You know,
What
you
does
can
that
either
mean,
sing or
studying
you
voice? What does that mean, studying voice?
You study technique because, of course, classical singing and opera is has very specific technique, and then you study languages and you study stagecraft. And,
Right.
Yeah.
And then you go on to get your master's, right?
I did. I did my master's at Indiana University, which has the largest music school in the world and has a fantastic opera program. So I did that in opera performance.
And then you moved to Chicago to sing opera.
So yeah, first it was Miami, then Santa Fe, then Sarasota, then Indianapolis, then Santa Fe, then Palm Beach, then Chicago. So
And
the
what
lyric
year
opera.
is this? What year is this?
95.
Okay.
Lyric Opera of Chicago invited me to come be a part of their apprentice program in 95.
95.
Yeah.
You're already in Chicago for 11 years. You arrived in 1984.
84 after 7 years in Champaign, the first of which was as the Decatur Bureau. I lived in Decatur. They gave me 2 cameras, film cameras. That's how far back I went. And the biggest story I covered was a story about these big birds landing in somebody's apartment complex.
Oh, yeah. That's a big deal in
You
Decatur.
know, there was a murder or 2 back when I was there, and we had chasing guys down these gravel roads out in the county, and you know, it was not for me. But I did sports in college, and I was an athlete in college, and told them at WCIA in Champaign that I wanted to be in sports. And the weekend guy was also a UPI photographer, and he quit to do photography full time.
UPI. There's
Yeah,
a
nobody
term you
even knows
haven't
what that
heard in
is.
years. Yeah.
So I take his job, and then the head guy was in law school, and he graduated and became an attorney. And so we were doing Illinois football and basketball play-by-play on this station, and there were thousands of applicants for the job, and they hired me because I worked cheap, and I was sitting there already. So
Right. You were
that's how
there.
I got that job. But I mean, it couldn't have been better training for me. I mean, you got to do everything, had to do everything. There was a game, a high school game, Urbana University High had lost 80 straight basketball games, I think.
Oh, wow.
And somebody called me at 9 o'clock before our 10 o'clock news and said, you might want to get a camera over to Uni High. They're ahead by 6 points going to the 4th quarter. And I said, I don't have a cameraman. So I picked up the camera. I knew how to turn it on, basically, and got over there and shot the last 4 minutes, and they won the game. And I interviewed the kid that made the winning basket. And, you know, it was huge back then.
Right.
And the next day, we were a CBS affiliate. The next day, they used my package on Dan Rather's CBS Evening News.
Really?
Because it was such a sensational, kind of a heartwarming thing. And from then on, I knew I was in. I wasn't going anywhere else.
You loved
It was it was so much fun.
How do you go from Champaign to Chicago?
Well, you put in your time, 7 years. I interviewed at WBBM and at WGN the same day, actually. And we'd grown up being Cub fans, so there really wasn't much question. If I got the nod, I was going to go to GN. And it turned out the guy that hired me in Champaign had become the news director at WGN. So as he always liked to point out before his untimely passing, he was the only guy that ever hired me for a job.
That's so true.
And it is true. And I'm glad he did.
So you arrived in Chicago in what month? In 84?
I got there in February of 84.
February of 84. Okay.
So there's not much happening right then and there. Illinois had a great basketball team. We continued to cover them. They lost in the Elite Eight at Kentucky to Kentucky, which they don't allow to have happen anymore.
Right.
But then in 84, the summer of 84, the Bulls draft Michael Jordan.
Greatest basketball player ever.
So things
you
are
get
happening.
to town and then Michael Jordan shows up.
And then the Bears get to the NFC Championship
Right.
game ahead of their Super Bowl year the next year. And things are popping, you know, and I'm thinking this is going to be happening all the time. The Cubs win
Yeah, the Cubs
the
are-
division in 84. They hadn't won in
did.
39 years.
Right.
So I'm thinking
This is a great
we're
year.
going to have winners every single year.
I feel you, man.
And we
right
didn't.
place at right time.
But it was sure fun right off the bat, though.
And Jim, when was the first time you sang the national anthem in public in your life?
Oh, in my life.
Yeah.
I think it was a Mariners game or something because, you know, I grew up in Washington State.
Okay.
And I was a part of a quartet. And I believe we did a Mariners game. I remember us doing a Sonics game. But that was way back, I mean, like 1985, maybe, 6, something like that.
And when did you do it professionally, when they started to pay you for it?
Oh, well.
Early
by pay,
90s?
what do
Yeah.
you-
Well,
So by pay in 1996, I did like the first few anthems for the Blackhawks every year. But that's when I was in the apprentice program with the Lyric Opera of Chicago. So it was like half a dozen games a year.
So you're still thinking at this point, I'm going to be an opera singer in Chicago.
Oh yeah, that was going to the Blackhawk games was fun. It was free food. I sang an anthem. We go down to the press lounge beforehand, right? Have dinner, take my 3-year-old son, and you sit and enjoy the game. It was fantastic, And Eddie Belfour was the goalie, and my son, I mean, he called the goalie the Belfour. Even when it was Hackett, he still called him the Belfour. he did that up for until he was 5 or 6 years old. Yeah, it was just so much fun, and there was no obligation on my part to be there. That didn't start until 2008, actually.
Well, let's talk about 96, the first time you go on the ice. So
Yeah.
it was 92. Dan, you probably covered this. It was Desert Storm, right?
Yeah,
where
exactly.
The fans started screaming during the national anthem and cheering. So you're going out on the ice for the first time in 96. You
Yeah.
have to be nervous. And they start the music and the fans start screaming and yelling and cheering.
Well, so I'd gone down and sung the anthem in the empty United Center because they wanted to hear me before they put me out there. And they're like, yeah, we'd love to have you. And they said, now let us explain how this works. You're going to come out here, everybody's going to cheer. And I was a little bit cocky. I mean, I was singing all the time then, singing with orchestras, singing on these stages. And I didn't, I listened to them talk about the fans cheering, and I felt like everything's going to be fine, no problem, And so when I went out there, though, the experience was a little bit different because while I was used to singing without amplification inside or with a large orchestra, which can get very loud, it wasn't just the noise. It was the fact that going out there and standing in the middle of 20,000 people cheering, and you're in the middle of that, there's no way a human being can yell at you and you don't feel that.
Right.
Inside, viscerally, right?
Sure.
I mean, whether it's goosebumps or you're cringing or whatever. And so when I went out there and I started singing and the crowd, they start cheering and then they swell up, Rockets, Red Glare, whoa, they get big. And then I started to kind of choke up.
Right.
And which is literally, for a singer, a bad thing to do because choking up means you're getting tight in your throat. So
not a good thing.
I had to do a real gut check and kind of pull everything down. And it's funny. I mean, it doesn't really lose its effect. There are times on a really cold night nowadays where, I wanted to stay and watch Thursday night football at home a couple weeks ago, But I come down, I do the anthem. Whenever I come off that ice, I still feel charged up. It just never, that part never goes away.
I can't imagine you wouldn't start singing either louder or faster that first time when that crowd
Right.
Well, more than once I've oversung it. And then I get to the end where I want to do Home of the Brave, the way that Wayne Mesmer always did it, taking that note high at the end, which I did kind of as a salute to him and as a way of kind of continuing sort of a Blackhawk tradition, right?
Yeah.
But there's been a time or two where I've gotten there and I thought, I should have just taken that down because that was a lot harder than it needed to be.
Dan, let's go back to you. 1985, the Bears lose in the NFC Championship. So we're thinking this is going to be a great year for the Bears, right? Michael Jordan, 85, remind me. Did the Bulls go to the playoffs that year? Was that the year they played the Celtics?
I believe that was that year, and Jordan dropped the 63 bomb on Boston in the one game.
Oh, man.
But they used to practice, they didn't have the Berto Center. They didn't have the Advocate Center. They had Angel Guardian Gym up on the north side, which was a leftover building from an orphanage. I mean, and the school and church had closed down. All they had left up there was a gym, and that's where the Bulls practiced.
You're kidding.
No. So I went up there one day before the season started, and Kevin Lockery was the coach then, and I was waiting to talk to him. And when I got finished with practice, he came over and he said, look, you don't want to talk to me. He goes, Jordan is ruining practice. He said, he scores every time down the floor. He steals the ball on the other end every time down the floor. He goes, you don't want to talk to me. You want to be talking to him. Now, we knew how great a player he was from North Carolina, and we saw what he did for Bobby Knight in the Olympics. But, TV coverage and all that wasn't all that extensive back then. So
right.
There were probably some people who didn't know that much about him. But as soon as he started to play, I mean, it was just gangbusters. He was so good, so much better than everybody else. And I'm not sure even the Bulls realized what they had in him.
And he was accessible back in the day, too,
Well,
at the beginning of his career.
everybody was, because there weren't, 20 radio stations, and people weren't so protective of the athletes and of their rights to what the athletes say and all those kinds of things. The Bulls used to always have a charity bowling tournament before the season started, and it was this bowling alley outside the Berto Center. So they always invited me to go do it. So I would go up and bowl, and Michael was on my team one year. And before the thing started, he and I both had gotten there a little early. I think we were both out playing golf before it started. And so here we are sitting in the bowling alley bar, just the two of us having a beer and talking. And I'm thinking, as time goes on, what are the odds of this ever happening to anybody again, getting a free 15 minutes with Jordan just to shoot the bull and have a beer and enjoy each other's company.
Right.
We had a few moments over the course of the years, but he and I have always gotten along well, and he's done okay without me since. So.
Did he want to bet on the bowling?
He did not, but I do have a good Jordan story. He was into golf pretty heavy, and the Western Golf Association allowed him to play in the Western Amateur, which is the most prestigious amateur in the country outside the U.S. Amateur. So he's playing, and he gets to play with Justin Leonard, who's an up-and-coming kid from Texas, and they get to know each other a little bit over the course of a couple of days. And as time goes on, Michael becomes Michael, and Justin goes on and wins the British Open. So he's a member at Royal Oaks down in Dallas, and my college roommate, who also played on the tour, is a member at Royal Oaks. So he calls me and says, we're doing a testimonial dinner for Justin, and they would love to get Michael to say a little bit about him. They're having people talk about Justin, and Michael would be great to do that. So I said, happy to ask him. So after practice, I go up to Jordan and say, hey, look, Justin Leonard? He goes, yeah, I know him. I said, they're doing a big dinner for him down in Dallas, and they want you to do 90 seconds and say what a great guy he is or whatever. And he said, F you. He goes, I'm not doing that stuff. And he walks off.
Really?
I said, hey, it's not for me. I said, it's for somebody else. I said, I told them I'd ask. I don't care if you do it or not.
Right.
I said, I'll just tell them you wouldn't do it. So 5 or 6 seconds go by. He's starting to walk. He stops. He turns around. Give me that microphone. He gets in front of the camera, does a perfect 90 seconds, drops the mic on the floor, says, you owe me, and walks away. And that was the kind of the way he was. You never knew exactly what you were going to get, but by and large, he was a lot of fun, and especially in the early days when, like you said, Pete, he was much more accessible to the media.
All the endorsements, just the charisma that he had, too, to go along with it. He could follow it up with the game.
Well, he was a great player. Yeah, he was the best player I've ever seen. But he was really smart. Not only smart, basketball smart, but business smart too. He had a lot of good advisors. David Falk from Nike was a guy that got behind him, and he had a lot of people helping him, but he knew what he wanted to do. And I think by and large, all the stuff he decided to endorse turned out to be a gold mine for everybody.
Sure. Yeah. Nike, Gatorade.
All of them.
Yeah. He made Nike.
No, he did a lot to make Gatorade as well.
Right.
They were genius to get him and Spike Lee together on some of those old commercials. There was some funny stuff in there.
Those were the best.
They were really good.
Did he practice harder than he played in the games? Was that true?
They never allowed us to sit in and watch practice, but talk to anybody that was on the team, and he was just a terror in practice. He got into a fight. He punched Steve Kerr out.
Oh, yeah?
He punched Will Perdue, I believe. He got in a fight with a couple of guys in practice. Nobody wanted to guard him because if you stopped him, he would just come at you harder. And if you didn't stop him, you had to hear it from him, which was just about as painful.
Right. 89 and 90, covering the Bulls, they couldn't get past the Pistons. Did you ever think that was going to happen? It's
like, they'd ever get past them?
Yeah, I don't know
absolutely.
If we can get past this hump.
Well, it was a matter of growing up.
Yeah.
Not for Michael so much, but for Scotty and some of the other guys. And once they started to beat them a little bit in the regular season, and Michael spearheaded the whole thing. He goes, look, we're not taking it anymore. They'd knock him to the floor. He'd get back up. Bill Lambier, one of my least favorite athletes of all time.
The most hated guy in Chicago.
For many reasons.
Bill Lambier.
I have some golf reasons that go along with the
Really?
basketball. Yeah, but
Can you share them?
Yeah, I could tell you about him.
It's the beauty of being retired.
Right.
It is. I don't care.
He tell you
Yeah.
whatever he wants to
Hey,
tell you.
there are several people that we don't like each other.
Sure.
But Bill was one of those guys born with a silver spoon in his mouth. I think his father was president of U.S. Steel, and he had a lot of money growing up. A good basketball player, went to Notre Dame.
Oh, yeah?
Had a great NBA career. Didn't need to do all the stuff he did. That was kind of the personality of their team. So years go by, and there was this celebrity golf tour. They had a bunch of big name athletes playing it, and they invited me to play. It was at White Eagle out in Aurora. So the first day I get Steve Spurrier and Mario Lemieux in my group, which was spectacular. I was so
Yeah.
nervous I could hardly swing the club. Second day it was a little bit better nerves-wise, but I had Mike Schmidt from the Phillies, Hall of
wow.
Famer, and
Yeah.
Lambier. So we're walking down the first fairway, and Lambier says to me, "Thanks for saying all that stuff about me all those years." And I said, "What, you didn't deserve it?" "Oh, you think those guys were angels?" I said, "Well, they weren't angels. They were just fighting back, you know."
Still carrying a grudge
And
on the golf
and
course.
we're trying to compete in this tournament. So he's having a big day. He's probably 3 or 4 under par, and he's talking about it the whole time. And Schmidt, who's a quiet guy and very serious about his golf, I'm looking at him, and he's going red from the neck up.
Oh,
He
yeah.
just can't take much more of this. So on a par 5 on the back 9, Lambier hits a great drive, hits his second shot to this close for an eagle. And he says to us, he goes, "I hit a 2-iron there." He goes, "I came off it a little bit though." And Schmidt said to him, "If you say one more word to me the rest of the day, I'm going to whip your ass right here in this fairway." And he didn't say another word. And Schmidt, his arms are like bulging
Oh,
out.
yeah, he's a big
his
boy.
face is all red.
Yeah.
He's probably 6'4" and 225 or 230. And that shut him up for the rest of the day, which was good for everybody. Probably good for Billy's health.
Did Mike hit a golf ball like he hit baseball?
He had a funky swing, and still a little funky, but so competitive and so driven to figure out how to do it
Right.
that he got to be pretty good at it after a while. And now he has his own golf course down in Florida
Of course he does.
where they call the pro shop, and a drone will deliver the beverages and snacks of your choice.
that's nice.
He's got it going on
That's
down
so
there.
nice.
I'm still waiting for my invite to that one, by the way. A lot of pro friends in Chicago I know have played down there. I'm sure I'll probably not be getting it.
We'll send him this clip. You never know. You're retired now. Jim, 2007, the Hawks finally lock you in full time. What changed? Was it the front office? What happened?
Well, a lot of things happened, right? Bill Wirtz passed. Rocky takes over. He brings in John McDonough and Jay Blunk. And one of the big decisions was we're going to put this team back on television, right?
Right.
And then Jay Blunk came to me. I guess this is how I understand it. He had gone to John McDonough and said, "Hey, you got to hear this guy sing," because they knew they wanted to have one person doing the anthem again, like when Mesmer was doing it.
Right.
I think they understood there was marketing opportunity in that, and so they decided that they wanted me to do it. And at that time, I was going through a divorce. They came to me, and I was like, "Well, look, if I'm going to do this, it has to kind of benefit me and the family, right? There's no way I can like go to a Blackhawk game, come home with like beer in my breath and say, 'Oh, honey, wow, I had a great time tonight.' And she's like, 'I did the homework, I did dinner, I got the kids to bed,' and so like the whole family has to benefit, which means that it's got to be a meaningful amount of money in order to make that work."
Sure.
And at the time, Jay Blunk, who married with kids of his own, he kind of put his head down like this. He just kind of started going, like I thought,
He knew exactly what you were talking about.
here's a man who's not been home for a lot of evenings, So, yeah, that's kind of what occurred. I thought for 2 years I'll give it a shot, and then of course everything took off. It's like when you were talking about coming on board once Michael Jordan was brought in, right? That's what was going through my head when you were talking about that. Is how you know, we had Kane, we had Taves.
Right.
Shortly after we got going in 08, then they made the decision to switch from Savard to Quenneville, which was a really, really gutsy move because everybody loves Savard. Everybody loves Savard, rightfully so, right? So, and then we had the very first Winter Classic that year. And then we went to the Western Conference Finals and lost to the hated Red Wings. And then the next year we won the Stanley Cup. And so everything just took off. It was crazy. And at the time, really, I mean, going through, in fact, I was just divorced in 09. I was free and single again, right? So I was just kind of out.
He was in full party mode.
This madness, you know? But it was surreal. It was party mode, but it was also surreal. And I got in trouble a time or two. And it was,
After the Hawks won the Cup in 2010, did you ever have to pay for a beer in this city? Ever? I mean, you walk in the bars, there's Jim, the anthem singer, let's get him a beer.
Yeah, I've drunk more beer for free than I have that I had paid for since then, that's for sure.
But 2008, Dan, you were covering it. You could just feel it in Chicago that the Hawks were making a turn.
That was a huge benefit for us at GN too, because when John said we're going to go back on TV, we're going to go back on WGN. So we had 20 games. Steve Conroy and I did the between periods and post and pre, and it was so much fun. And I learned how much I didn't know about hockey at that point. But gosh, the players, I mean, you mentioned Kane and Taves, but you know, Duncan Keith and Seabrook and Hjalmarsson and all the guys that followed, Hossa and Patrick Sharp and everybody. I mean, they had such a group. The only downside of it was that once they won, and you know this, Jim, they knew they couldn't keep them all together because they just couldn't keep them under maybe the most restrictive salary cap in sports in hockey.
Right.
So they had to get rid of some guys, and they almost made a run back the next year. They lost to Vancouver in a heartbreaking 7 games. They lost the first 3, won the next 3, went to overtime in Game 7. I was at the game, and Sharpie had an open net and missed it, and then they came down and scored in overtime and knocked the Hawks out. But there were 2 more to come.
Right.
Yeah, that's what's amazing is that they did keep it together enough. They kept like always that kind of core, and then there was some shifting assets.
They had like 6 guys who were getting big money.
I hated to see Bufflin go. I felt like
in
2010.
There were so many great guys.
His role changed so much, right? And he went from being that defensive guy to being that guy who held the front of the net. And it's like,
stood
Pronger,
right in front of the goalie.
Who's Pronger?
Right.
You know? Because Bufflin could just.
He didn't care. He was as big as Pronger for sure.
I think he was stronger too. Pronger couldn't handle it.
The first Winter Classic, I was there. I thought that they did everything right. It was just wonderful.
It was fantastic. It was so cold. That's what I mean, I tried to dress well, but
I feel like all of them were cold,
my God.
Jim.
Well,
I mean, Wrigley Field.
Well, they did have one in LA,
Field,
you know.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it is this year. This will be my third.
Really?
My third, because I did the one in 2019 in South Bend. Okay. And it's funny because I went back and I looked at pictures from the one in 09, and then looked at pictures from 2019, and it's become so much more sophisticated. Just like the platform, for example, I was standing on in 2009 was just like plywood. You know, in 2019, it's like this awesome NHL black and white logo, and I mean, just everything was done up. The show, you know, you know how sports or arena is now, right? There is no empty space. There's an ad or something happening on everywhere space.
I was just in a meeting with some Cubs personnel for a committee that I'm on, and we were talking about the original Winter Classic at Wrigley Field, and then comparing it to what they did in Seattle the last time they had one, and then what they're going to do at Wrigley Field for this new one. And they were saying, you know, it's like night and day, the difference in production, the difference in facilities, infrastructure, all of it. So it's going to be great at Wrigley Field this time around, and they're going to make it really good.
I can't wait. I feel like I'm your +1 for that one.
You do you? Hey, you're talking to a retired guy. I have no bounce.
You don't have any juice?
Nothing.
No juice.
Zero. In that one 2009, I did make a phone call about halfway through the first period, and as to Pete Hassan, I think, and as Pete I'm dying. I'm
In the
freezing
front
out here.
office, Pete.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I need someplace to go. I'm
Right.
gonna die. So my guest and I, we all ended up in one of the suites. I forget what it was called. It was there in the north west corner, and they had this suite up there, and PNC maybe. Anyway, we're up there, and Bobby Hull's in there, all the Savard and Esposito and all those guys, and we get through the first period, and the Hawks are up 3-0, and everybody's so happy, because we're like 3-0, and Bobby Hull just kind of in his Bobby Hull kind of way is like, it doesn't mean nothing.
He was right.
It's the playoffs.
First
Anything
goal,
can happen.
second period wins
Yeah.
this game. And sure enough, man, the Red Wings came out and just turned the whole thing around, and we lost.
And
that,
Bobby
so.
went over to the Metro after the game to drown his sorrows.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I understand that was quite a party over there. I know some people who were semi in charge of Bobby over there, and it was a hard night for them.
Yeah, I didn't make it there. I'll tell you what, though, I miss the Red Wing rivalry. It's like the team that I love to hate.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't really hate them, but I love to hate them.
Right.
And we walked in around 9:30 a.m. for, I think it was a noon game in 2009 there at Wrigley Field. People are already coming in, and they're walking around, and the energy was just palpable. And all morning long, at spontaneous moments, this chant would break out. Let's go Red Wings, Detroit sucks. Let's go Red Wings, Detroit sucks. And there was so much symbiotic coordination between
Yes.
the two fan bases.
Yeah.
It was like, how could you hate each other? This is like the best thing ever.
But you can't hate him now.
Yeah, you can't.
I know,
Gators
that's
playing for him
it.
now.
Yeah, I know.
The hate is over, I think.
Well, plus we just don't see them like we used to. It doesn't
Right,
have the
yeah.
meaning. Once you kind of take the meaning out of it, it's a memory,
Take me to 2010 Stanley Cup final. You're singing at the final. What is that like?
So, yeah, in 2010, they actually won in Philly, right? So if you mean like the final game, then...
Not the final game. I mean the first game that you sang for the final.
Yeah, it was... it's hard. Honestly, I can't remember that specific game, Pete.
Was that game one?
We would have had game... Hold on.
This
we
is
got to
old,
think about
this. Is old
this.
people right here. Nobody can think about it.
I know.
It
Did
was
we have...
2-2-1-1-1, right?
2-2-1-1-1. That would make it two here.
I can't
two there.
remember what game it was, but I was at
One.
the first home game that year, and the
Oh,
reason
yeah,
that I
that
wanted
would've
to
been
bring
right.
it up,
Yeah.
Because in the sixth game, we won it there.
Right.
Yeah.
the
yeah.
reason I wanted to bring it up is because I've never heard it so loud at the United Center. And you're trying to sing.
Well, I got to tell you, people ask me all the time, so what's the loudest anthem that you've ever experienced? And I can't tell you. I mean, they put decibel meters on that thing at times, and it's like louder than a shotgun blast. Do whatever. I forget what the decibel measurement was. But, you think about it, a shotgun blast, boom, it's there, it's gone. This is like sustained, and it's just ridiculously loud. And probably the one that stands out the most in my mind is the one from 13 when we came back against the Red Wings, and we were down 3-1, and I remember walking out on the ice. It's now 3-3, right? This is it. Are we going to go to the Stanley Cup final or not? And generally, people will start cheering when they start. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise, remove your hats, and honor this person from the military, that person from the military,
Right.
and join Frank Pellico and soloist Jim Cornelison. Okay, so they say all of that, and then the crowd starts to cheer, right? That's normal. But they turned on the lights, and the crowd just exploded. And I can hear Gene Honda. It was like,
Yes.
I mean, it was just so loud. And Frank started the organ. It was hard to hear him. And
Do you wear an earpiece?
No, I don't.
Oh,
I just
man.
never have done that. Just goes back to singing, having an acoustic kind of background. Frank has one, so he can follow me, as it were. Yeah, but that was an amazing experience. I've never heard that again from the crowd. Just it extended the time of the cheering by what? I don't know, 30, 40 seconds or something.
yeah.
And
Yep.
it was just so loud.
Guys, thanks for sharing today.
You got it.
Really good
Enjoyed
to see
it.
you. Thanks, buddy.